Hello, welcome to the debate on Sky News. I'm Martin Stanford. Here's our take on developments brought together from America, the UK and around the world.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
Fact or fiction, is the 2016 presidential campaign drifting into the realms of unreality? Plus, picking up the pieces after Black Friday. And this.
Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name.
So can we really take this presidential campaign seriously? There have been some surreal episodes than ever before. Could this merely be the screenplay of a political movie? Or are the real messages getting through? In just a moment, we'll speak to the author and executive producer of House of Cards, Michael Dobbs. But as usual, the Democrat commentator, Jeffrey Robinson, is standing by in New York, and Conservative commentator Armstrong Williams is in Washington. Jeffrey, this is one heck of a screenplay if somebody wrote it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can't invent this stuff. And when you think of it in terms of House of Cards, I mean, we've watched both series, both the British and the American, and it's wonderful. And kudos to Michael Dobbs for having come up with this. But I do have one criticism. Frank Underwood, who is the American political character, is such a horrible, dishonest, deceitful, conniving, lying, cheating, miserable son of a bitch. Surely he should have been a Republican.
Armstrong, do you know, I could have bet that Jeffrey would make that accusation. Have you caught the series?
Everyone has caught the series. It's a fantastic series. There's so much realism, as you almost think you're watching not a reality show, but something that's really happening in many political capitals around the world. And it is, you're right, it is really a strange election season. Donald Trump declaring this week that he saw thousands and thousands of Muslims cheering after 9/11, and it was not even footage from the United States. It was something that happened outside of the United States. And even when the media tells him that he's factually incorrect, he doubles down. I mean, he just creates the facts, and whatever he wants to do, his audience doesn't seem to care, and the media seems to just throw their hands up in the air and don't make him as accountable as they do other candidates that's running for the same office.
Let's bring in Michael Dobbs, shall we? Lord Dobbs, a British Conservative politician and a best-selling author, perhaps best known, of course, for House of Cards. Michael, let's compare and contrast the two systems, could we? And particularly the amount of money involved. This presidential season, they're talking of a candidate needing something of the order of $2 billion to win the White House. Isn't that bonkers?
It does seem very strange, particularly from a British perspective. But I suppose that is one of the key differences between the systems, because the British system is becoming more presidential. We pay much more attention to who is Prime Minister and leader of this party or leader of that party than perhaps we used to 20, 30 years ago. But the essential difference is the money that's involved, and which means the different ways that you campaign. You're way ahead of us on social media, for instance. We've just started catching up on that, and that was one of the reasons, I think, for the Conservatives' surprise victory in the election here in May. But also, you know, America has the power. You know, I'm very proud to be British and a British politician, but at the end of the day, it's the American president who's the leader of the Western world, and that's why it's so important to us all.
When you had to adapt your storytelling for the American environment, was that really tough? Was it very different?
Politics, ambition, beastliness, wickedness, great virtue, they are really very universal, eternal properties. I mean, it all really started for me when I was a kid. I was forced to read William Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. You know, the most powerful man in the world, hacked to death on the steps of his own capital by his closest colleagues. I mean, and politics has been the same ever since, really. But, you know, well, we have had to make changes, of course, partly because the American version is even more ambitious than the British version was. And we're now 25 years later, so social media, mobile technology, 24/7 news coverage plays a hugely important part and has changed the nature of politics. But what matters deep down are the personalities, and those personalities, their ambitions, their faults and their wickedness is eternal. But I do have to emphasize that the House of Cards is a drama. It is not a documentary. I spend most of my life, 90% of my life, in politics, doing very dull, ordinary things. But at the end of the day, it's the dark places that you go to which really tell you what a man or a woman is capable of.
Well, let's bring in Jeffrey and Armstrong at this point. Jeffrey, the point is, though, that anybody who really wants to go through the pain of becoming a candidate and maybe winning the presidency, they have to be seriously ambitious, don't they?
Well, seriously ambitious and slightly crazy. I mean, back in the days when Lee Iacocca was chairman of Chrysler Corporation, and he wrote a best-selling book that was on the New York Times list for, I don't know, 2 years or something. Somebody went to him and said, "Mr. Iacocca, is this your bid for the presidency? Is this the start of your campaign?" And he said, "Who would want to be president? First of all, I'd have to take a 90% salary cut. Second of all, what's the president got that I don't have? A plane? I have a plane. But what I have the president doesn't have is if I want to go out to dinner with my wife, I can just go. I don't have to ask anybody's permission. I can do anything I want." And the type of person who would run for the presidency is probably, by that regard, most of all, not qualified to be president. It's a very, very strange job that only certain people would want.
Armstrong, just on the structure of the way the American system works, the fact that anybody, literally anybody, can get a nomination to become president, they don't even have to be a leader or a leading figure in their own party. Isn't that a bit odd? Isn't that a weakness of your system?
Well, I don't know if that's exactly accurate. This is not the first time that Donald Trump has toyed with the idea of running for president. It's certainly the only true outsider in this election season is really Dr. Ben Carson. But most of these people have extraordinary backgrounds. They're very accomplished in their fields, whether it's pediatric neurosurgery, whether it's an entrepreneur, and even as politicians, you're a governor, a United States senator. You've shown that you can serve people. You've shown that you can be a change agent for good. What happens, though, even if we look at our past leaders, even from John F. Kennedy to Dwight David Eisenhower, and fast forward to Reagan and Carter, up until within the last 15 to 20 years, you never had so much of a focus on someone's background, of their personal lives, on issues that are really non-substantive. And you never had this proliferation of media, bloggers and social media, where you just continue to go into someone's background and talk about their personal lives. I mean, and much of it changed with former President Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. And so much has changed, and we begin to believe that these people are non-substantive, that they're reality figures. But listen, Donald Trump is a really accomplished individual. Now, how Donald Trump operates in the political sphere is a different ballgame. But listen, this is what the media created. It created where you have to make a lot of money, you have to spend a lot of money, and they create celebrities. They don't really create leaders anymore. They want to create people who can lead with headlines and sell out debates and sell out audience and get them ratings. It's really not the substance of the audience.
Well, let me put that to Michael Dobbs. Isn't that the bonkers part of the American system? If you put into one of your storylines that a successful hotelier wants to have a stab at the leadership, wouldn't your colleagues in the production team have just laughed you out of the room?
I keep saying that actually writing political fiction is very easy, because what you do is you take political reality and then you water it down. And you have to make it credible. Because in fiction, people are required to act rationally, reasonably, sanely, and in their own best interests. And then you pick up your newspaper or turn on the television and you see what real politicians so frequently get up to. I mean, it's an extraordinary system, politics. I may tell you that here we say that politics is the world's second oldest profession and takes most of its rules from the first oldest profession. But I have to say that in some ways I think that politics probably doesn't have any rules at all anymore.
The rules are all going, Jeffrey. Literally anything goes.
Well, yes, since Citizens United, literally anything goes. I mean, the worst Supreme Court decision in the history of the Supreme Court. I will say that when you go back to the Kennedy election, Kennedy-Nixon, it did get personal. And that was really the first time they questioned the fact that a Catholic could be president without revealing national secrets to the Pope. That was one of the serious arguments against John Kennedy. It's crazy when you look at what has happened since. And Armstrong's right, since the Monica Lewinsky scandal, when presidents kind of stepped down a little bit from their high altar and started looking very human and very vulnerable. We elect people by television. It's all that, and that's where the money's going. I don't think this is going to be a $2 billion election, but it's certainly going to be a $1 billion election. And once those television cameras come in for a close-up, you see the candidate warts and all. Proof, Ben Carson, who is disintegrating as we speak as a viable candidate, which he never was.
Michael, we should let you in on the it's no secret, of course, but in the jousting between Jeffrey and Armstrong in this. Jeffrey doesn't think much of Dr. Ben Carson, and Armstrong is an associate of his. So these two often discuss the merits of this particular candidate. But let's widen it out a little bit, shall we? And let's maybe focus on the Democratic side of things. Michael, I haven't asked you. Who do you think from the Democratic lineup for 2016 is going to succeed?
Well, in some ways, I feel as if the election campaign really hasn't started yet. It really hasn't got to grips with it. And one of the worrying things that worries me about where politics is going, not just in the States, but actually all over the West right now, time and time again, electorates appear to be looking away from established figures and established parties, away from experience. And you see that throughout Europe, almost every government that's come up for re-election over the last 6, 7, 8 years has been thrown out. With one or two possible exceptions. Yeah. And what you're seeing with, perhaps Donald Trump and Ben Carson in the States is people going for those without experience, perhaps precisely because they don't have that experience and aren't tarred with the problems of failure. But that really worries me, because where else, what other profession would you have where you say, I'm going to take the candidate with the least experience?
But that's the body politics problem, before. Michael, isn't it? That's the body politics fault. If the present system, the current system, the system up to 2015 has been so flawed, or people have become disillusioned with it, maybe this is why the outsider candidates do so well.
We're still struggling to understand quite why this should be so universal. And you ask which of the Democratic candidates I prefer. Well, on the basis of what I've just said, one would actually possibly suggest Hillary Clinton, because she certainly has the experience. But do people believe that she is the person to really deal with the problems of the future, when actually she appears to have had quite a few problems dealing with the problems of the past, so to speak? I mean, that's really... but the one thing that you can rely on with Hillary Clinton is she knows who she's talking to and what she's talking about. Whether she comes to the right judgment, however, is something else.
And Armstrong, one thing every candidate needs, if we take the House of Cards model, is a ruthless spouse. So how many of the... Lady Macbeth figure, I think she is probably. But anyway, in terms of Robin Wright's character, that is, how many of the Republican candidates can boast a spouse who's up to the job?
I think all of them will boast that. I think one of the things that don't get much attention for now in this presidential run are the spouses and their backgrounds and their accomplishments. And especially for spouses who have been associated with politicians who continue to run for office and raise money, they certainly must have steely character and know exactly what they're dealing with. And if you're dealing with a spouse of a pediatric neurosurgeon or a billionaire like Donald Trump, you're no slouch potatoes. You've had to have some background just to deal with those men and what they represent on the world stage. And so, listen, I would never underestimate. Sometimes it's the woman who's the most ruthless of them all, and she gets the least of the attention, and she just trots a man out front because they're more ambitious than their man and want them, like Hillary Clinton was once with former President Bill Clinton. She was the anchor behind him. No one will ever forget that 60 Minutes interview when they thought it was all over for the Clintons, and she stepped up to the plate and showed her steely backbone. So I think there are more women like her than we give credit for.
Can I just ask Michael about one other thing about political numbers here? You're a member of the House of Lords, Michael. The Americans, I think, arguably may have a little better system for a second house. In a country with 7 times the population we've got, they've got 100 elected representatives, popped in there for 6 years. We've got 821, and a lot of them are there forever. That's bonkers, isn't it?
No, well, not a single one of them has been elected in the House of Lords. This is the magic of the system. What really matters is the effectiveness. And it seems to me that what you've got in Washington right now are 2 elected chambers and an elected president who have clunked together and are getting nothing done. They can't agree with anything. And so you've got a state of semi-paralysis, which is perhaps one of the reasons why Frank Underwood, a ruthless, wicked, unpleasant politician, but my goodness me, he gets things done. And I think that's what the Americans are really desiring at the moment, somebody who can actually get something done. At this end, yeah, we're unelected in the House of Lords, but our job is actually to smooth. We don't always manage it successfully, but it's to smooth and oil the wheels of government, not to stop them turning. So 2 very different systems with 2 very different outcomes.
Jeffrey?
Now, Michael, who spent a lot of time in the United States and was partially educated in the United States, will know why we dumped your tea in the harbor and why we completely rejected a parliamentary system. And why the system of checks and balances between the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary was put into place. The best parliamentary government is usually a minority government, because then things don't get done. And I think the people don't want stuff done. I mean, that's the whole Republican thing is we hate government. We don't want government to do anything. We want the states to do it all because politics is local. No. We rejected the parliamentary system, and the Senate works very well for certain things. And the Senate's job is well defined by the Constitution. The House job is well defined, and so is the presidency. But may I ask Michael one question? Because as a fellow author, I'm fascinated to know. He originally wrote the novel, or Michael, you originally wrote the novel with a British character. And when you write a novel and spend a year or 2 or 3 doing that, you have the British character in your mind. You see him, you know how he moves, you know how he talks, you know everything about him. What was it like to suddenly see your British character, with whom you spent all those years, turned into an American character over whom you had much less control? How did you accept that?
Well, can I tell you a little secret, a little story? When the phone rang and they said, "Hi, Mike." Now nobody ever calls me Mike, but hi, Mike. We want to do an American version of this, and we've got Kevin Spacey and David Fincher on board. What do you think? And I said, this has got to be a trick question. Fincher, Spacey, and I'm supposed to have to think about this? I thought for 3 nanoseconds and said, look, whatever they do, it is going to be touched with a bit of class. And even if I have no control over it whatsoever, I know that they will take my baby and they will grow it up into a wonderful new human being and creature and vehicle. And that's what they've done. And it is still on the move. I mean, but again, the essence of the story goes back at least 2,000 years, and you could probably have based it in ancient Egypt as well. So for me, it's a matter of great excitement to see how this thing is developing. It's like watching your child grow up.
Good for you. Good for you. And cashing the check.
Yeah,
well, there is that too. That helps my family grow up.
Armstrong, is there any part of Frank Underwood you admire?
You know what? There's always some social redeeming value. You may not think that he's a caring person, but on some level, he really cares about the country, and he feels this is what he has to do to protect the country and to protect the interests of those that he feels he cares about most. And he does it in a ruthless way, and I think he reminds all of us what we could possibly become. And like you said earlier, he generates results. I just hope that people don't think you have to take his path in terms of lacking character to manufacture and get things done and get the jobs done. But I don't think Frank Underwood is too far apart from many people in elected office around the world today. I think he's a representative of what people not necessarily have become, but what they've always been.
Michael, don't give too much away because I'm still working through season 3, but you're already filming season 4 right now in 2015. So presumably that airs in election year. Then what happens?
Well, I think we will have to see. We will sit down and we will get those wonderful creative brains together and see what we think the how the runes will cast, because of course it is a challenging year next year. Because if the drama is to really strike a chord, as it's done, then it has to have some semblance to reality. And the reality, as we know, in a presidential election year, will be changing and changing fast. So it'll be a huge challenge. But if we get it right, it'll be wonderful. And so far, I think and believe that we have got it right. So I'm full of confidence and full of optimism that whoever wins the presidential election next year, that Frank Underwood will be up there.
Lord Dobbs, Mike, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Now, a reminder, you can catch up with the Sky News debate on Apple TV, Roku and Catch Up, and of course at skynews.com/US. Yes, it's the Thanksgiving weekend. Time for festivities, fun, food and films. How do you celebrate? Let's ask our guests, Jeffrey and Armstrong. Armstrong, Thanksgiving, what does it mean in your home?
Well, Thanksgiving for us is the biggest holiday of the year because, you know, I find myself in South Carolina with the entire family. It's a time of being neighborly. It's a time of remembrance. It's a time of it's just a time of reflection. And so more than any other holiday during the year, it's when all the family is together to celebrate all the good things that have happened, not only in our lives, but in this country. Though we face these crises like terrorism in Paris with our brothers and sisters in Europe and around the world, we are definitely thankful for the things that sometimes we forget to be thankful for.
And Jeffrey, this is something that really does unite the United States of America, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a time for family and for those who can't get to family. When my daughter was at university here in New York, she'd always say, oh, by the way, can this one or that one come for Thanksgiving? And the automatic answer is yes, of course, because people need to go someplace for Thanksgiving. It's a very important thing. Interestingly enough, I've always been fascinated with the real story of Thanksgiving, which, by the way, is not an American holiday. It actually was started by the British. It's a great story. In I think it was 1789 or so, George Washington proclaimed a national holiday called Thanksgiving, not to celebrate the Pilgrims landing at Plymouth Rock in 1621, but instead to celebrate the newly formed Constitution of the United States. It wasn't until 74 years later that Abraham Lincoln said, oh, no, let's change it, and we'll have Thanksgiving and celebrate the Pilgrim story, which is the one that all school children in America know about, Massasoit and the Indians and the lunch under the trees, and turkey and popcorn. The Indians gave us popcorn. But none of that's actually true. 2 years before that, in 1619, there was a service of Thanksgiving by a small British colony in Berkeley Plantation, which was somewhere near Culver City, Virginia. And they actually called it a celebration of Thanksgiving and had a meal afterwards. So we owe the celebration of Thanksgiving not to the Pilgrims, but to the British in their colony of Berkeley Plantation.
Well, I'm glad the British did all the right things, Jeffrey. We often share things and get you guys to talk from an American perspective about events in your country and around the world. I'm going to share something now that's happened in our country. It's kind of interesting. Ahead of the Star Wars films, a cinema chain has decided it's not going to run an advert which the Church of England created. The advert was simply various regular people doing a montage of the Lord's Prayer. Here's an example.
Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name.
Thy kingdom come.
And so it goes on throughout the prayer. Now, the idea, I think, was just to invite people who may or may not be a people of faith to have a think about these things at this particular time of year. Jeffrey and Armstrong. Armstrong, you have a thought. The cinema chain advertising people have said they're not going to run it because some people might be offended. What does an American think of that?
You know, you allow the marketplace to decide that. We've had issues with the Passion of Christ. We've had issues with making with Noah and the Ark. And when they felt as though that what the production in Hollywood was putting out was not a depiction of what Noah was really about, it didn't really do well at the box office. That's a business decision. That's not something that the government or anybody should get in. Let the box office decide whether people want to attend it or not, or whether people want to protest it.
Jeffrey, what do you make of this?
I don't understand it at all. I mean, I think that the decision is completely bonkers. The Lord's Prayer, of all of the prayers, is probably the most neutral, religiously neutral. Doesn't mention Christ, doesn't mention Israel, doesn't mention any of the various factions who would recite it. That and the 23rd Psalm. I just don't get it. How can you be offended by that?
But it's up to the market to decide, Armstrong. What's your take on this?
It's up to the market to decide. We have issues like this similar in the United States, and the people always come out on top when they just put their dollars and their voice and teach Hollywood, any other institution, a lesson about where our values truly lie. And if that was an issue in the United States, the people would win it hands down, and the Lord's Prayer will be in those cinemas across the country. But let the market decide.
Well, talking of markets, let's go from God to Mammon, shall we? Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Are you getting the credit card out this weekend, Armstrong?
I like helping the economy. I think these stores, people like ourselves, have to spend money with retailers and others. So I see it as supporting my brothers, especially as an entrepreneur. Anything I can do to support them, I go to the stores to show support, not necessarily buy their goods, but they're one and the same.
It is a strange phenomenon, though, Jeffrey, isn't it? It really has taken off, and now it's another export that you guys have sent over here. Stores and retail chains are going mad for this.
Yeah, we've got to support the economy in some way. By the way, the sirens, if you hear them, welcome to New York. We're waiting for a drive-by shooting any minute now. The economy needs a boost. This is a great way to do it. And I know that my wife and I have sat down and we've said, look, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, we may want to make a major purchase, and decided the only thing we really need is printer ink.
And do you get that discounted by somebody on Black Friday?
This is America. You get everything discounted and delivered for free.
Okie doke. And if there's one thing on your shopping list, Armstrong, what might it be?
My shopping list, I actually like shopping for others, technology and things that's going to increase, especially my nieces and nephews' education. But you know what? Look, I like shopping for others. And you never know until you walk in a store. It's the holidays. You walk in the store, you see something that somebody you really care about will like, and you just purchase it. You have no idea what you're going to purchase. So it's best to be open. That's when you get your best buys instead of going in there with some preconceived notion about what you want to purchase. Okay.
Well, listen, let me wish you both a very happy holiday weekend. And we'll see you in a week's time on this show. That's it for this edition of The Debate. You can continue watching Sky News on Apple TV, on Roku and Catch Up, and of course at skynews.com. Until next time, goodbye.